Vive la France! Bonjour mon ami, bienvenue. And that's about as much French as you're going to get out of me today. But we are in the French state of mind as the Gala convention, the Gala TCG convention has been happening in Paris over the weekend, and we did get a few juicy bits of details from it. I'm having to lump this video in with the Q&A information from the other day as well. As you can probably tell by the 5 o'clock shadow and the slightly disheveled look, I'm recording this in between two back-to-back shifts. My boss is actually just getting now, as I record this, to Gamma Convention over in Reno, where we're hopefully going to get some even juicier Lorcana bits of information, but because of which we're all having to sort of pull some extra hours at the store. So I hope he's having a blast. So before we do the French connection, we are going to talk a little bit about the Q&A that happened on social media the other day. It was an hour long or so rules Q&A with Steve and Ryan, the two lead designers on the game. And for the most part, it was just clarifications, answering things we already knew. There were about 5 or 6 big things that we can take away from it, and just for the sake of brevity, they're the ones I'm going to go over now. I'm going to put a link in the description to an awesome video by a good friend of mine, Braden, over at B224, who covered all of this stuff in much more detail. So regarding your deck size, 60 cards is the minimum limit, but there is no maximum limit to your deck size. There is no maximum hand size either. So as far as maximum hand size goes, I can't see that being a problem. Regarding maximum deck size limit, I do imagine that within the rules, as in the sort of full in-depth rules that we are no doubt going to see eventually, I do think there will probably be a part of that says that the deck must be able to be shuffled in a suitable amount of time, down to the tournament organizer's discretion. Okay, Shift had a lot of clarifications and was easily the mechanic we knew least about going into this, so I'm glad it's been confirmed a little bit. Can you challenge or quest after shifting a character? Basically, the rule is that the shifted character can do whatever the character is shifted upon onto can do. So, if you play a character and then play a shifted character on top of it, it will still need to be, the ink drying will still have to happen. It won't be able to tap for questing or attacking. But if you play a character, the table comes around back to you again, you then play a shifted character, there's no more ink drying on that shifted character. It can do all of the actions that the one underneath it could do. That makes cards like the Shifted Aladdin much stronger, because it means you can come out, swing and banish something straight away and get that lore switch. Cost reductions do apply to shift characters. So for instance, if you have a dingle hopper out that says that you can pay 1 less to play your next character, that does apply to the shifted cost as well, meaning you can get a shifted stitch out even on turn 3 technically. Like, you'd have to have the god hand, it'd have to be dingle hopper, stitch new dog, shifted stitch on 3, but still, that's pretty good. The only thing it is worth noting is that in all these situations, the cost itself doesn't actually change, it just becomes cheaper to play. So, for instance, if you shifted out an Aurora using Dingle Hopper, and therefore she only costs 2 to stitch, to shift, the words are so similar. If she costs 2 to shift, Stitch doesn't see her as a 2-costed creature coming into play, so the cost is still 3 on her. Actually, with Aurora, the cost is actually 5 on her. So basically, the number in the top corner is always the cost and is not affected by any of the shifting or cost reductions, such as Dingle Hopper or Mickey Mouse making brooms cheaper, that kind of thing. It means you can play them for less, but their cost is still the same. Meaning also things like just in time, you're not going to be able to cheat out a Stitch Rockstar shifted, because his cost is still 6, which is over the 5 that Just in Time is looking for, even though he's cheaper to play as shift. So the cost in the top corner of the card never changes and is set in stone. All of these abilities, whether they stack or whether they're shift, just reduce how much you actually end up paying for it. The cost itself is still a hard number that doesn't change. Shifting cards do count as entering play, so for any card that says, you know, if something enters play, it will apply for that. Damage counters carry on over, different color, you can play cards onto different colors. So a lot of the stuff we already kind of knew, or at least very much assumed. The only other big one, I think, is that what happens to cards when they're removed from play if they're shifted. So if you banish a shifted character, both of the characters, the one on top and the one underneath, both go into the discard pile. If they are bounced to their hand, like with Cruella de Vil's ability, both cards come back to your hand and then split and become 2 separate cards again. And probably most excitedly, if you banish them to the Inkwell, if you send them to the Inkwell with something like Let It Go, they both go to the Inkwell as separate cards. So, like, you can use Let It Go on a shifted character if you really need to get rid of it on your opponent's side, but they're going to get 2 ink for the trouble. And maybe it can work the other way. Maybe you can use Let It Go on your own shifted character to gain 2 ink. That seems a very expensive way to ramp, but it's possible. Basically, they split off, they all go there, and then act as separate cards once they're in their new zone, which is kind of crazy and awesome. Next up, a lot of stuff about the Inkwell and how that works, which makes sense. There's a lot of people coming to this game from other games that don't use this sort of system, so it makes sense that it wants to be clarified. Pretty much all of the questions were just clarifying things we already knew. If something comes in exerted, it can't be unexerted on that turn, that sort of thing. The only big thing here really is that the Inkwell is not common knowledge and is not public knowledge, meaning once cards are face down in the Inkwell, neither you nor your opponents can go and look at them and see what's in there. It wasn't completely confirmed that you're not able to write this information down in a tournament setting. The only thing they said when that question was asked was that the discard is common knowledge, and but normally you're able to make notes, because otherwise you're just penalizing people for having not as good memories as other people, I guess. But yes, you can't check what's in your Inkwell. Now, this does seem strange until a few people came at me with this and was like, oh, I don't get it. Here's a good way of thinking about it if you're a Magic player. There are many cards in Magic that allow you to look at a few cards from your library, place one of them into your hand, and then shuffle them and put them at the bottom of the library or something like that. As soon as they go to the bottom of the library, they are no longer public knowledge. Neither you nor your opponents can pick up your deck and go, what was it I put there again? And have a look. That's not part of the rules. And that's the exact same thing that's happening here. You can look at the information as it's going into the Inkwell, but once it's down there, it has to stay down there. Why they're doing this, I'm not 100% sure. It's probably the only rule so far that seems to be a little bit against their sort of welcoming and open rule set, honestly. But I guess they have their reasons. Perhaps it's just to keep it less confusing for people, or to stop that FOMO, that fear of missing out, knowing what's gone in there from things like One Jump Ahead or Detective Mickey Mouse. I'm not really sure, but anyway, the rules are the rules. You can't look at the Inkwell once the cards are in it. That was about it, I think. The other thing we briefly mentioned with the shift stuff, that abilities do stack. If you have multiple Dingle Hoppers out and you tap them both, it makes the cards cheaper and cheaper. If you have 2 Mickey Mouses out, the Sorcerer Mickey, your 2-drop brooms will be free. There was a few sort of not yet or can't say anything about that yet, which is interesting. For instance, somebody asked about like a colorless card that can go into any deck, and they said they weren't able to talk about that yet, so that's definitely something that they're looking at and we could maybe see in the future. When asked if multiple Mickeys will make brooms free, they specifically said your 2-drop Mickeys, your 2-drop brooms even, will be free if you have 2 Mickeys out, suggesting we're probably going to see a 3-drop or a 4-drop broom. Again, kind of makes sense. That Mickey card only really works well if you've got multiple brooms in your deck that you can make advantage of. And that's about it, I think, from the Q&A. Again, I'm a little late to the party with this one, so you can go and check out B Square's video in the description. It's fantastic and goes all over this in a lot more detail. Okay, next up then are some new cards. Like I say, we saw these from a Parisian trading card game convention, so they are all in French, and I'm going to do my best to translate them. First of all, we have a 5-costed Inkable 4/4 in steel for 2 lore in Beast. My phone's ringing. Oh, that's exciting. That's a cool parcel that's going to be something for the channel that's coming. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. The Beast. Angry and Bitter. He's a Storyborn hero prince, and he has the ability Destruction. When you play this character, you may banish a chosen item card. So this is the first time we've seen item banishment in the game, or item destruction in any way. Really good. Definitely one we needed to see, I think, because whilst I don't think any of the items we've seen so far are particularly strong, they can probably get away with you, and really you need to be able to deal with any sort of board state that your opponent is showing you. Has the flavor text... she will see me as nothing but a monster. She will never see me as anything but a monster. I guess that is. That's cool. Yeah, otherwise good. Whether or not it's going to be worth playing a card in your deck purely to get rid of items is yet to be seen. At the moment, I don't think it is. But we haven't seen we may well see like incredible items later on that need to be dealt with. Otherwise, just a good body, I suppose. A 4/4 with 2 lore for 5 in steel. Steel definitely got a lot of love here. We see a lot of steel cards, and maybe they are just it's just a good card to have with a bonus of item management in there. We'll see. Another steel card then from Little Mermaid. He's a 2-costed inkable 1/3 in steel for 1 lore. Prince Eric, courageous and fired. Storyborn hero. Sorry, my French is like high school French, and I now do night classes because my son goes to French school. So, like, I apologize in advance, and I'm sure by the time this video comes out, this has all been translated properly. Offensive 2. So this is challenge 2. So he gets +2 when he challenges. So this is basically a slightly bigger Captain Hook. Little Captain Hook, a forceful duelist. So he's a 2-costed 1/3 that becomes a 3/3 when challenging for 1 lore. Forceful Duelist is a 1-costed 1/3 that becomes a 3/3 for 1 lore. So, no, he's a 3-costed. He's a 1-costed 1/2. So all you're getting here for an extra ink is 1 more on the willpower. So I don't know whether that's necessarily that strong. But if you are building a deck that is all about this, then that's your curve right now. You've got 1, 2, and then 3 is your Hercules, I suppose, and then 4 is your Beast. And you've just curved out nicely into steel. As what we've seen so far, I don't think like mono steel is going to be a thing because it just doesn't seem to have the lore generation that it needs. But I do see steel being a very good controlling the board state color, whilst your secondary color is all about getting lore. So any of the higher lore creature colors, so Sapphire instantly comes to mind, or any of the lore creatures where the lore is going to be easily obtained, like a lot of the emerald stuff we've seen. I can see steel emerald or steel sapphire being really strong out the gate. The steel's dealing with the board state and dealing with what your opponents are doing, and then the other color is just sort of ramping up into lore generation. Next up, we have a 3-costed action in steel, inkable. Fracasseur, I do not know what that word means. It's going to be something like stomp or crash or something, I guess. 3 damage to chosen character. So that's okay. 3 for 3. So far, the only other one of these where we've seen direct damage is Fire the Cannons, which is also in steel, and that's 2 for 1. So this is, slightly not as valuable, but it is inkable, and I suppose we have to work out how much the fact that it's inkable sort of affects the cost of these cards. But otherwise, yeah, just again, it's direct damage in steel. This is definitely shaping up to be what we see. And then finally in steel, we have a 1-costed inkable 2/2 in steel with 1 lore called the Creatures. These are goons is the English word for these, I'm sure. Literally probably doesn't translate, but I'm pretty sure these are called the goons from Maleficent. Yes, and they are what's that? I don't know the word. Something of Maleficent. Soldiers of Maleficent, something. It's not soldiers, but something like that. Storyborn allies. Yeah. So, 1-drop 2/2 is a good body. Again, it's just got that 1 lore, so it's not necessarily strong in the lore generation, but it's just a very early body that comes down and deals with a lot of your opponent's first, second, and third turns. You're going to be throwing these into stuff to just get it off the board, honestly. Like, I will happily swap this for a Maleficent. Weirdly enough, even though these are the Maleficent's allies, I will actually happily kill Maleficent, the 1-drop Maleficent, with some of these, because that's just gonna just as good tempo play. And then 2 more, bringing the total up to 6 altogether. We have a 4-costed inkable 2/5 in Sapphire for 1 ink. For 1 lore, Aurora Rose. So it's probably Briar Rose, not pink. Storyborn hero princess. Something like Disconcerting Beauty or something like that. When you play, so this is a scar. This is a little scar. When you play this character, chosen opponent gets 2 less strength for the turn. So a little scar. The scar is a 5-drop that gives you -5, and this is a 4-drop that gives you -2. So it doesn't seem quite as strong there. But otherwise, good body, nice willpower, big butt on her, which is great, Aurora. Good for you. But yeah, otherwise, fine. And then finally, a 3-costed inkable 3/3 in Sapphire for 2 lore, Jasmine Disguised. Oh, you're gonna ask me about that. that's a lot of flavor text and it doesn't matter, so we won't do that. Okay, cool. Jasmine 3/3 for 2 lore. Again, just a solid body, but still, you know, fine for mid-game, I imagine. Probably gets outpaced by a lot of cards already revealed, honestly. So the stuff from Gala is fine. Nothing really mind-blowing there. The Beast is good to see with that item removal. It definitely really, for me, confirms that Steel is shaping up to be a board-controlling color, where you don't really necessarily hold that much sort of love for your characters, and you're quite happy to turn them sideways and kill stuff with them, you know, like, and that's interesting to me. I don't think it's going to be on its own very strong, but it's going to be a very strong secondary color to the main color that's going to be generating your lore, because at the end of the day, without a color that generates lore, you just ain't winning the game. And so far, Steel doesn't seem to be that color, but seems to be a very strong secondary color that can deal with the board whilst you do your thing. There we go, that's everything. I'm sorry this one's a little bit all over the place. I haven't been able to prep. Normally I'd get all of this information on a sort of Google Doc for me to read through while I'm recording, but I finished a 12-hour shift. I'm now going to do another 12-hour shift, and this is the only window I've got, and I wanted to get this out before we start seeing any of the gamma reveals that will probably start on Monday coming up, Monday will be when this video goes out, I guess, because I have to leave it rendering while I go to work. Oh, the life of a full-time worker trying to do YouTube. I used to do YouTube full-time, and it was hard work, but it was nice to just be able to press record whenever something came along and not have to work it around a full-time job. And also, my boss who's away, I'm looking after his kid while he's gone, so I've got 2 under 7-year-olds in the house for the week as well. Oh, woe is me. Anyway, it's all fun and games, isn't it? Until the next one, I love yous all to bits. Be good.